Good morning, guys. Happy Monday. I'm here plugging away, doing what I do best, selling final expense insurance. But, anyways, I wanted to get on here and talk to all of you guys about your dialer system. That's right. That's the system that you're using to make phone calls and receive phone calls. You know, a lot of the reasons people get in trouble is because their technology is not 100%. And today I want to talk to you guys about that. The last thing you want to do is finding yourself in a situation where you're having to pay a bunch of money to a litigator because you broke the law. So today I want to talk about the dialer. Is your dialer legitimate? Okay? Because if you're not, you're going to find yourself in a really, really bad situation. You know, most of the cases that I've settled over the course of the years with people is because they're making calls like crazy people and they're not even, trying to follow the guidelines. So for right now, first of all, I'm not an attorney, but I am a final expense telephone agent. So I've been forced to learn these guidelines and these laws in order to avoid lawsuits that can cost you your business. But again, the dialer. So for a lot of you guys that are new, you're probably wondering, what is this guy talking about? Telephone Consumer Protection Act, so go ahead and look it up, the TCPA Act, and with artificial intelligence, you can get assistance to help you with this, or cross-check the information that I'm going to share with you. But the TCPA states that we are not allowed to use an automatic dialing system to make calls, bottom line. That's what the law states. So what's an automatic dialing system? Again, anytime you're using equipment, an application, software, where you're using it to dial your clients, receive calls, text message, etc. So how is this even possible that it's illegal to use that type of equipment? Well, let's break it down. The reason these laws exist is because they want to avoid all of these unsolicited phone calls. So they're designed to stop the illegal phone calls. So the first step in order to making sure that your dialing system is legitimate is that every single lead that you have in the system, you have to have prior express written consent. That's right. So the person has to give you consent verbally, electronically. And how do you get that? Well, when you generate a lead in real time, there's your consent. That consent lasts for 90 days. And in that consent, they consent to an automatic dialer. If you're using artificial intelligence, if you're using pre-recorded messages, all of those are okay to use, again, if you have prior written consent. Now, some of you guys say, I got the lead, I have the consent. Well, that only lasts 90 days. That consent only lasts 90 days. So after 90 days, you can no longer call that person, especially if that person's on the do not call registry, much less you cannot use the equipment, the dialing system that you have. No longer. Okay? So bottom line, you got to have consent in order to use your dialing system. Number two, the dialing system, in order to be compliant with TCPA, has to have a DNC scrubbing system. So are you checking the phone numbers that are not on the DNC? If you have the prior written consent, you can call. But after 90 days, that dialer needs to make sure that it's not calling on anyone that's over 90 days old. Also, if the customer, called into your advertisement, but then after talking to you one time or maybe a second time, they tell you to stop calling, your dialer needs to be able to track that and block the phone number. DNC is probably your biggest issue for a lot of you guys that are running on a dialer, because the systems that you're using to check the DNC, they're not accurate and they're costing you money because they're calling people that are on the DNC, not just federal, but state. Also remember, there's 12 to 13 states that have their own DNC mechanism. So the dialer needs to be able to check for that. The dialer has to have an accurate phone, and the phone number needs to be registered with your business. So if you're using a dialer and that dialer is, changing the caller ID to match the person you're calling, that right there is illegal under spoofing laws. Okay, stir shaken laws were implemented a couple years ago that prohibit people from going into the dialer and switching it to make it a localized presence. That is illegal. It's under spoofing. And that violation is $10,000 per spoof call. Super serious. So if your dialer is coming up with a caller ID and that caller ID changes every time you call, that right there is illegal. Not to mention spoofing, where they copy somebody else's phone number, all designed to get people to pick up. Well, you're going to end up picking up a litigator on that phone, and he's going to say, fuck you twice, like you see on my shirt. It's not fun, and you don't want to be in that situation. Also, if your dialer is doing pre-recorded messages, you get it nowadays with AI, it's really easy to do that. Well, if you don't have that prior written consent, you cannot send pre-recorded messages, any of that, unless you have the consent. And that consent only lasts 90 days. After 90 days, you got nothing. So what happens then for all of you guys that you have this dialer and you got all these numbers, these aged leads? Does that mean you can't use the equipment, the dialer, to call? Well, let me tell you something. The law states that you cannot. But you can cold call. After 90 days, you can no longer text messages, pre-recorded messages, AI. All of that is no longer available to you. But you can definitely still cold call. Now, in order for the government, the TCPA, to categorize your system as a dialer, okay, then the way to avoid that is by manually dialing. So if you have the person's phone number, it's been over 90 days, and you manually check that the person's not on the do not call registry, you can manually dial. So you got to click to call. You can't use any of the fancy features or any of that. Click to call manually. You can still do that after 90 days. But again, no longer text messaging is allowed, pre-recorded messages, any of that is no longer allowed. Guys, these right here will save you thousands, if not millions of dollars. TCPA violations can be at $1,500 per. The spoofing can be $10,000 per. And the FCC can fine you up to $43,000 per violation. So imagine if you get 4 or 5 of those in the mix, it can cost you. Last year, I settled almost $200,000 from centers, agents that have no clue on this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put the checklist in the comment section so you can do your research. But bottom line, you want to make sure that you're following these guidelines, especially with auto dialer laws, because if you don't, I'm telling you, it's going to cost you and it's going to hurt bad. So with that said, be safe, stay compliant, and see you guys at the top. Peace.